crisis, promoting a key community initiative, or fielding tough questions on live TV, how you show up and share your message matters. Today, we're joined with our fantastic panel of professionals who bring a wide range of experience from both sides of the mic. We have Troy Clarkson. He is the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Brockton. We have Christina Metcalf, Communications Officer for the Town of Brookline. We have Senior Project Manager Kirsten Glavin, and she's also a former reporter of NBC 10 Boston and Boston 25 News. We have Nicole Figueredo, CEO of Capital Strategic Solutions. So grab your coffees, settle in, get ready for an engaging and interactive conversation. Feel free to use the hand raise feature or drop your questions in the chat as we go. We'd love to hear from you. So we're just gonna jump in. I'm gonna start off by asking Christina, just give me a little bit of background information about how you've dealt with the media, working with the media in your position and in previous positions you've worked in.
So I joined Brookline about 16 months ago, and from my previous community that I was in, it was about a third of the size and not much media coverage. And now being so close and adjacent to Boston, the really had to bulk up and work that media relations muscle, and really quickly learned how to learn the players, made those contacts, and really just figured out that that's a skill that I needed to work on and really focus on coming into this position. And I really just made sure that I had a policy in place, and just my information of if somebody's reaching out to staff and that they're looping me in, so I'm aware of all the stories, whether it's positive, negative, and can sort of anticipate what's going on in town and if there's going to be more media coverage coming. I think the biggest hurdle was the crisis communication part of it. We've had a couple of 3 alarm fires, we had a building collapse, a couple other things that required immediate response. A lot of it was on the weekend or around the holidays, so not everybody's in office. There's work from home, so really figuring out how to connect with the staff on the ground, the boots on the ground, and making sure that the information is getting to everyone and not getting out to the public before I have the chance to be able to filter it and frame it in the way that it should be, and making sure that we're not making any statements. For example, the building collapse, making sure that nothing went out that oh, it's this person's fault or that person's fault. There was no determination, so making sure that our police and firefighters aren't putting information out there that is not completely correct, or we don't have determinations at the moment of it's happening. So let's wait until afterwards to make some clear determinations.
Yeah, I find that when having worked in both the news and on the PR side for public safety and municipalities, it's hard to, you want to give the media information because they're asking for something if they know something's going on, right? When a crisis is going on, and you can only give them so much because you don't actually have the information. So I feel like it's always good to be like, we're working on this, we're aware of it, we're going to get you more information as it evolves. So thank you for filling us in on that. I bet there's a lot of different crisis communications that go on within the town, since it is so close to Boston. Troy, did you want to share your background with working with media?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, and happy to be here. So my career began actually right out of college, writing press releases for the federal government for the 102nd Fighter Wing on the Cape, and for the last 34 years have held a variety of positions. I've been here in Brockton for 6 years, but served as a town manager in a couple of different communities before that. And very early in my career was an elected official, a member of the select board in Falmouth for 12 years in my 20s and early 30s. I also, because I don't have enough to do, write a newspaper column every week in Falmouth, where I live. So I've lived on sort of both sides of that dynamic. And I think we all know and recognize that the nature of communicating with the public has changed profoundly certainly over those 30 years, right? I got involved in public life in a pre-internet and a pre-social media time where it was much simpler. Today, I think we as public officials have to be mindful that people receive their information in a variety of ways. And so I think the demands on us and the responsibility to provide timely and accurate information is more important than ever. And I think communities that don't provide information immediately don't have to wait to be solicited, but recognize that an informed public is a necessary and I think very positive part of a healthy democracy. We need to take extra steps these days to make sure, as Christina said, we are anticipating what the issues might be and really pushing information out so that the public feels as though we care enough to keep them informed and we care enough to share information. One just very small example, and it is related to the media. When I got to Brockton, our budget was a collection of spreadsheets. Today, the city council approved it last night. That's 500 pages, and that's designed with the public and messaging and communicating with the public in mind, so that the public feels confident that we care enough to share accurate information. We're willing to put the time in to engage them. And so I think having that as a core philosophy is key to being successful in today's media environment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that is why it's such an important thing to have a communications plan or a crisis communications plan when things do happen, so that before it happens, you already have the plan in place. You're not figuring things out essentially on the fly, right? Kirsten, I know that obviously you're on both sides here now, but do you want to give us a little bit of background information about your time working as in the media and now, as in the public sector side of things?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me this morning. It's fun to be here. So my background is in the media. I got my start as a reporter and anchor in Tyler, Texas, which was a very small market. After that, I worked in Providence, Rhode Island for a couple years, then went down to Greenville, South Carolina, where I covered Greenville, Spartanburg, and Asheville, North Carolina. That was a lot of fun. Did that and did a lot of investigative work down there. After that, I went to Boston. Liz and I actually met at Boston 25 News when I worked there. And after that, went to NBC Boston, which is where I was most recently up until March. Doing a lot of reporting, fill-in anchoring, covered a lot, the gamut. The first round of the Karen Read murder trial, for example. A lot of stories I think all of us are probably familiar with in the area. So I've been in the thick of it, and it's fun to be on the other side. I feel like I'm learning as I go. It's really interesting to see how both work together. Both sides really work together to get a message out clearly, concisely. Timely is so important. And I agree with what everyone has said so far. It's more important now than ever to have your ducks in a row and be forthcoming with information, especially now that social media has taken on a life of its own. So it's so important to have a plan in place and to know your talking points and to know what you want to get out there to the public, because if they're not hearing it from you these days, they're going to find another way to find out that information. And that other way might not be accurate. So more important than ever. And I'll toss it back to you, Liz. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's more important now than ever with this growing beast that we call social media. And I know Nicole refers to it as that often. Nicole, I know you've worked as a PIO for the city of Framingham, and also down in Pinellas County. Do you want to share a little bit of your background now working obviously on both sides, but seeing, having to talk to the media and, making sure all your ducks are in a row and trying to prep those that you work with and your experience working with the media?
Sure, I know. What I refer to as the beast is the social media, because you have it coming at you from every single angle. And I know that we've fielded, Liz and I have fielded together questions from, municipal officials as well as select boards and city council members on how to deal with the conversations on social media. And we've had some conversations going back and forth about those conversations. When I was in the town of Framingham before it became a city, I was their first PIO, and then I got them through their change in governance, stayed with the mayor for her first year, and then headed off down to Pinellas County. and I was the Pinellas County Utilities communications person. And I handled anywhere from water main breaks to boil water orders to, just getting out the daily messaging. I think what's important too is we have to keep in mind that everybody learns on a different language. When we're sending our messaging out, we need to do, simplified, cleared, bite-sized, digestible pieces of information. That way there's translatable in a variety of different languages a little bit easier. I have had instances where we do a lot of support for engineering projects and large scale infrastructure projects. And our engineering partners like to use a lot of technical jargon, which can be confusing for a lot of community members. So it's important just to get that. My advice to anyone doing communications is bite-sized, digestible pieces in a way that people can follow the messaging, whether it's on social media or even dealing with the press. Crisis communication, I think we've all kind of dipped our arms into it, our hands, our fingers into it at one time or another. But I think the day-to-day communications can be overwhelming for any PIO or for any municipal official, whether you're a select board member, elected, or an appointed person on a division head or a department head. So I think that's why we have this coffee talk and why it's been, this one's been one of our most popular ones to have. We do have a question in the chat Q&A. And the question's coming in from Patricia, and she's asking, how do you handle the media if they're digging for information that wasn't confirmed but have their own agenda and run with inaccurate info via newspaper and social media? Does anybody want to take that?
I'll take a stab at that one because I dealt with that dynamic a lot. And I'll say the critical work in answer to that question occurs not when the crisis occurs. It occurs long before, right? It occurs in planning and having a specific protocol about who is authorized to talk to the media, what they're empowered to say, how much information they can share. And I say this in all sincerity, I think too often the relationship between the public sector in general and the media is unnecessarily adversarial. And I think there's mistrust on both sides, and it doesn't need to be that way. As someone who straddles both worlds, I think the media more than ever plays such a critical role in sharing information, holding government accountable. And as government officials, we need to be comfortable with that and accept that that's their role. It doesn't need to be adversarial. My suggestion is forge relationships. When you go work in a community, any community, don't wait till something happens to get to know the people who work in the local media outlets. Reach out, forge relationships, get those folks, and I'm saying this to media folks and government folks, realize that we're all real people with real lives and families and challenges. And I think when you can humanize those relationships, then the communication in crisis becomes much easier because you've established a relationship and hopefully established some trust. So I think the answer is if someone's digging, you can respectfully tell them that information isn't available. But I think if you've done the work to develop the relationship beforehand, then when you say something like that, it tends to diffuse any conflict or any discomfort because that relationship exists. It doesn't work all the time, but I think I've always found that the time that you put in to forge those relationships always pays off.
I agree with you, Troy, on that. And that's something that I've learned in a lot of the trainings that I've been in, and having had the experience on both sides, building those relationships and really establishing a really good rapport with your local media is so important because they have your back in that way. But also, I always say, don't fear the reporter. Like they're there to do their job. The best thing that we can do is be transparent. We did just get another question in the chat. It's from an anonymous attendee. In your opinions, are there ever situations where it's best to not comment? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Sure, I will. I think that there are situations where you cannot comment because it's a personnel issue, it's a union negotiation. It is your staff or the people you're talking about have those privacy rights and whatnot. And so I think that being able to provide background information of yes, this, if we had an incident where we had former town employees arrested. And so, okay, this is the time they worked there. This is what it is. Other than that, I have no other information for you. So giving them a little bit of background to hopefully be able to round out their picture a little bit more, but also respecting that employees' privacy and the process that's going on. So I think that there's other things that you can say than no comment. I have no information at this time, but I can make it available. And so you're saying I'm going to follow back up with you afterwards once I can comment. I think things happen really quickly and there's different layers that you have to go through, whether it's your town manager, administrator, sometimes it's the select board, or you're trying to figure out different, there's other outside agencies that you have to work with. We had an oil spill in the Muddy River about 6 months ago, and we had Mass DEP along with our town officials and DPW and fire working all together, and they wanted to wait on releasing some of the information. And so I was having that conversation with them of what can we release, when do they want to release it, but also at the same time providing information to my community and saying, okay, like there is something going on, but we just need you to stay away for a minute because your help is appreciated, but like let's let the professionals do that. And so it's finding that balance and letting them know it's no comment at this time, but we're going to get back to you. And if I can provide more information with you, and I think that goes back to Troy's comment about building those relationships and being able to say, hey, I can't give anything right now, but I'm going to be able to give you something a little bit later or as this develops. And it's not a no, it's just a not right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Christine, is managing those expectations by saying, we don't have anything right now, but give us a couple hours and we might be able to circle back, and setting the cadence for when you would be able to provide them with something is important. But I honestly think a straight out flat no comment doesn't work in this day and age. There's a reasonable expectation. We're all working, in government agencies, and transparency is a huge thing. So being able to say, we can't provide any information on that certain situation because it's a personnel issue and it's a violation of someone's privacy, or the information's not available yet. Why don't we check back with us in a couple of hours, and we might have something for you at that time. But I think just a no comment's going to get minds generating even faster. I would be interested in hearing Kirsten's feedback on that.
Nicole, I completely agree. A no comment is not fun as a journalist because it signals that they're not talking, and your mind immediately goes to, well, why not, right? And it may be for a simple reason like a personnel issue or something like that we're not privy to. But I think it is so important to do what you mentioned, which is acknowledge the question, say we're going to work on it, we're going to look into it. We'll circle back if there's anything we can share. It just shows that you're trying to look into the problem, and that you care. And I think that is so important, as opposed to just kind of maybe what could be perceived as blowing off a question. Because if a reporter's asking it, it's probably for a reason. It's important information that they're trying to find out. Someone probably in the community has raised a concern. So just having that relationship, the kind of relationship where you're working together on something, I think is so important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And seeing, and I always say never say no comment ever. But to just at least give them that little background and that you're working on it is so important. And it goes such a long way with journalists, and not acting as if you're being closed off, or you're not being transparent. Being forthcoming is the best thing that you can do if you can, and it's not going to impede investigation or something like that. I definitely agree. I'm gonna start asking some questions. So this I can just throw it to everyone, but can anyone give me an example of a time when you did have to communicate with the media under pressure, and how that went? What did you do well? What did you wish you did better?
So there's been I'll gladly jump in on this. There's been so many instances over the years, particularly when I was serving in a couple of different communities as a town manager. One of them was the town of Bridgewater, and the town had been governed by the same form of government for 300 years, and overnight changed the form of government with a ballot vote, with nothing in the charter for any sort of transition period. One day there was a board of selectmen and a town meeting and a weak town administrator. And then the next day they got rid of the selectmen, got rid of the town meeting, invested virtually all of the authority in the town in one person. And that happened to be me. And it was a very tumultuous time. And so I think, and I arrived just before the election, so I wasn't part of the planning. And so communicating to the public and the media about what that meant for their everyday transactions with the government, but also what it meant in the larger picture and what role they played in the new government and how they participated. And so we had a select board that was still in existence but had no authority for a few months. And then the town council got seated. They were the legislative body. And they were kind of uncertain of their role because some of them had been select board members, which are executives, but they were town council members, which are legislators. So it was I don't want to use the inappropriate word, but it was a shit show. That is for something like this, that's a technical term. And so, but it was my job as the CEO of the organization to, again, engage the public, engage the media, create that credibility. And there was a lot of conflict. And sometimes, as we know, with organizational behavior, sometimes conflict needs to occur to create that homeostasis in an organization. But I was at the middle of it. And that was at a time where the commenting on newspaper stories online had just begun. And so when people discovered it, it was just out of sight. And the comments were, and still today, as we see in social media, particularly those of an anonymous nature, were pretty vicious. So I think what I learned in that is to even be more focused on creating a message and remembering that it's possible to stay on message and have that message be the answer to any question that's posed, right? When you know what the message the government wants to convey is. I think the thing that I wish that I had done better and that I've learned is you don't have to, in fact, should not engage in what was then online commenting, what today is social media. It is a rabbit hole that you cannot get out of. And so I would suggest that no member of any public organization should engage in a comment section on a social media post, on a tweet, on Instagram, on Facebook, LinkedIn. It is not only is it not productive, but it winds up elevating conflicts. And it's something that we as public officials, I believe, should just stay away from. Get the message out there and leave it out there.
Yeah, it is a slippery slope to go down, and I agree with that. And in one of our trainings that we have here at CSS is actually working with municipalities and organizations and trying to help to guide the way that they respond on social media when they do get these kinds of comments. It's like, do I respond? Do we not respond? And in what you should do. I would say there's a lot of trolls on social media, right? So it's never a good idea, I don't think either. But there are certain situations where if there's someone's asking a legitimate question, I think it's good to have that answer there and provide an answer on an official platform, on a website that is from your town or on an official social media platform from your town. So I do. Go ahead. Sorry.
I do think it's important too that employees are educated in not going into those rabbit holes on social media with their own personal accounts, because it does open them up to the public records requests and things like that. And you don't want them to get opened up. You don't want somebody to have to share all their chats from social media with anybody. And I've seen it, I've experienced it, throughout my career and advised employees against it. I'm like, you really don't want to get involved in the back and forth. You may think it's a dig against, and there's a lot of public employees have a lot of pride in their departments and the work that they do, and they should. And when somebody slights them on social media, they feel like they need to respond. And I'm like, it's better not to respond to somebody who's, for lack of a better term, a keyboard jockey that's jumping on there saying something that they wouldn't file a complaint about with a town official or with a city official or a city department. They're doing it on social media to get a rise out of someone or to have that crowd mentality. Just tamper it down and wait, and the pack will attack. And once they do, there's other people jumping in saying, hey, they did a really great job on this, or they've been working on this, and this is what they're carrying on their plates. So let the crowd handle it. They'll handle it. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're doing a great job. And most municipal workers are. They're working longer hours. They're, diving into areas that they wouldn't normally get into because there's a shortage of employees. So that's another thing that's, also very concerning.
We do have another question in the chat. I believe this one would probably be more for Kirsten, but maybe we can all chat about it. So do journalists agree to show questions in advance prior to a scheduled interview regarding an important and controversial issue? Is that a norm?
Yeah, happy to take this one. The short answer is never. Ethics, I think, would come into question here, especially if it is a controversial issue. I have never agreed to give questions over in advance, especially if it's controversial. I can say if it's something more lighthearted, like a feature story I'm working on and they've never done an interview before and they're nervous, then I'll say, okay, no, it's, putting someone at ease and saying, I'm going to ask you about X, Y, and Z, giving them the topics ahead of time to start thinking about, that's totally fine and that's fair. But if I'm going after, let's say, a politician who is accused of doing something, I would never want to give them questions ahead of time. I think it's important to remember that journalists are working for the public, they're working for you. And so I would keep that in the back of my mind during my reporting at all times. And it's not fair to give someone a question ahead of time so they have time to plan and create talking points and, maybe manipulate the messaging a little bit, especially if it is controversial. I would want a very truthful, raw answer. So, I think it's also fair to say a lot of the times I'm thinking of questions on the fly here. And depending on how they answer, I might ask a different question out of left field because they brought something else up. So, it's a very fluid situation, but short answer again, I've never known a journalist to ever give a question ahead of time to somebody that they're going to interview, especially if it's a controversial situation.
I can say a thing on the other side of that where I've asked, for questions, and obviously, you don't always get them, or if it is a lighthearted story, you kind of do. But even just giving general topics, I think is great, especially when you have, like Kirsten said, you have people who are maybe newer or haven't given interviews as often, so they're nervous and they don't want to say the wrong thing. And I don't think that it's the journalist's intent to catch them up in something if it's, just supposed to be an informational sort of interview on something that happened, say like the 3 alarm fire, like what's going on, and maybe the chief on duty doesn't, know the answer yet, but he says, oh, it looks like it was, arson or something like that. And that's like a big leap to make. And so giving that training out and saying, okay, this is, what to, having those ideas of, okay, knowing what you can and can't put out there and say like that, I think is really, helpful to have that bit of background. And I think on my end, I kind of, if there are interviews that are happening and I have, the staff or department heads come and, okay, let's talk through this and let's go, what's the worst case scenario, and sort of be prepared for those questions so that if they do come out of left field, or like, what's the worst question that they could ask? And are you, and having some sort of, preparation of, okay, if they ask this, this is how I can at least sort of say what I need to say, but not, get myself, like you said, into hot water, or maybe giving out information that you don't. So it's not about, I think, making the not giving the reporter the answers they want or not hiding a story, but it's making sure that, again, we're abiding by the policies that we have and giving out and making sure that we're not overstepping because we're caught off guard by a question and making not putting out information that we can't at that time or shouldn't be at all. So I think that's on the back end of that. I appreciate that journalistic ethic, but I also, for people who aren't as involved in the media, and I can say when I first got here and giving all that and getting all the questions and interacting with the media way more than I ever have in previous positions, it was definitely a time where I had to all right, just make sure that I calmed down and took a breath and made sure, answering those questions and really the questions that did come out of left field made me start thinking, okay, this is how I need to prep my staff. This is how I need to prep department heads so that when we do get those questions, that they're not completely caught off guard and answering in a way that's going to be, put the town in a negative light.
I think
Yeah,
that's
and to
definitely-
Christine, whoop,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead,
Go
Chris.
ahead. I was just going to add to Christina's point. I mean, most of what we're doing is not a gotcha moment, right? I think the
Yeah.
key word for me in that question was controversial, in which case it's a little bit of a different situation. But typically, relationships with town officials, municipalities, whoever it is, you're working together to get the information out there. So it's certainly not a gotcha moment. I don't think any journalist likes those situations anyway. So definitely different situations. I think you'll find most journalists are very willing and happy to work alongside city officials, PIOs, whoever it might be, that's, with the goal of getting the information out there. So I did want to make sure I capitalized on that too. And that's a great point.
Yeah.
Something that Kirsten said, I think, is such an important point. The media works for the public, right? And so do we. We're all on the same team, right? Just different facets of it. So if I can say one phrase that I would recommend to anyone that's ever dealing with the media, it's tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. And that sounds simple and trite, but so many of our colleagues get in trouble because they try to change the message to what they think they're supposed to convey rather than just telling the truth. And the other one is, if you don't know the answer, then say it. Tell the truth and say, I don't know. Because so many times we get into trouble when we don't want to seem like we're uninformed or incapable of answering. And so we say something, and then that creates more problems. And that's not just for communicating with the media. I would suggest for public officials communicating in general, whether it's communicating to a select board or a town meeting or to a city council. I counsel my team members all the time. If you're before the city council and you don't know an answer, don't manufacture it because they'll sniff it out and you'll get in trouble. So tell the truth. And if you don't know an answer, say, I don't know. If you use just those two basic tenets of communication, you'll be okay.
Those are great points, especially with the preparation and telling the truth and being honest if you don't have an answer. I've said that time and time again in my career as well to anyone that I'm preparing to get in front of a podium during a speaking engagement or during a press engagement, or even just being asked in general a question by their select board, a department head being asked a question by their select board. I've seen it happen where the department head answers a question based on the narrative that they wanted perceived rather than what was exactly happening, and then got caught up in that situation. And I'm like, why would you do that? To me, it's just mind blowing. It's easier to say, I don't have that information right now, but let me get back to it the next meeting, because you're managing the expectations of the public. And if they no longer have trust in what you're saying, they're never going to believe you again. And that one statement could ruin a career that you have worked very diligently for.
I absolutely second that. And as my mom would always say, honesty is the best policy. But seriously, I think you're just gonna get yourself into you're gonna almost dig your own grave if you lie or you try to manipulate what's being said or change the narrative of it. So I agree with that. Christine, we have a question from we have another question. So this one is for Christina and Troy. When do you allow your staff to speak directly to the media? What is your policy?
So I actually started because of all the different press information that we're getting, and usually my staff is very good about looping me in on things, but we actually are in the next, I would say, month. We have a media engagement policy that sort of lists out this, if you get an email, reply back, CC myself, and also, asking for a deadline. I think that's something that, staff doesn't always know what to do, like asking for that. And so is it an immediate deadline, end of day? Do they need it in 2 hours, or do we have a little bit of time to get the information on that? And also it has the information about, what to say other than no comment, and just sort of lays out a framework so that it's not for me to come in and know and to, I'm going to respond for them, but it's okay, here's the framework of like, what is the question? What is the topic? And are you the subject matter expert to answer this? And are you feel comfortable answering this? Do you need any coaching? And then going forward and say, okay, this is what we're going to do and respond. And I think it creates, those conversations with the different level staff, with the department heads, get them more trained to handle those requests, so it's a lot quicker going forward and they know what to do. And also just making sure that they know that I'm here for a resource, so if they need to talk through something before they have an interview. I think it also, before going through interview, sometimes in the for TV spots and everything like that, I'm like, make sure you have your 10-second sort of elevator pitch, like your sound bite, that if no matter what they take from you, that's what you have. So I think that sort of that media policy outlines that and sort of gives us a framework so that everybody knows, okay, they need to be keeping us in the loop, letting us know what's going on, and that way we can, again, anticipate those problems, but making sure that we don't have staff who aren't authorized to do that. So going back to that, the story about, we had somebody who was a former employee being arrested, and they went to the former department place of work, and they were asking for staff level interviews, and I knew that was happening because they'd emailed the request to myself and also to a general department inbox. And so I was like, all right, I got in contact with that department head, say, hey, this is, they're coming over. Make sure it's either you or that division head that should be talking, but no other staff should be talking about that. And they're like, yep, that's, we don't want that either. And so I think it's just giving the staff the sort of guidelines to say, nope, speak to my division head, speak to my department head, because, I'm not the right person. So I think having those kind of clear guidelines, and writing them out and having an active refresher every year of that policies, especially communications, I think should be living documents and should be refreshed and implemented and, on a yearly basis and reminded of.
I think Christina touches on an important point that I mentioned earlier, and that is, in order to be successful, a lot of the work that occurs in that arena happens long before a member of the media calls for an interview, right? It's establishing that policy so that members of an organization know who's authorized to speak to the media and in what fashion. And so, in fairness to the members of the organization, it's important for leaders of the organization to set that tone and to set those rules so that you don't have challenges. I think the next part of that is, how do you convey that message has been conveyed? Meaning, when I was a town manager, I authorized all of the department heads to speak to the media without going through me on routine stuff. We just painted the fire engines green, and there's interest in that. The key, though, was when they reached out and answered a question, they copied me so that I could keep the elected officials informed, right? There's a concept that I call the grocery store rule. And it relates to media relations as well. I would never want an elected official in a community in which I worked to be grabbed in the grocery store and asked about something that they didn't know about, right? So keeping the leaders who are not necessarily responding to the media, keeping them informed about those interactions is critical, so that if they then get contacted, they can say, oh yeah, the town manager or the town administrator or the department head looped me in on that, and here's what I think. And so to have an effective media strategy, there's so much more than just what do you say when you get the phone call from a newspaper or a TV reporter. It's what leads up to that, and then what occurs after that to complete that circle so that everybody is informed and in the loop.
I agree with that. And I love that grocery store kind of rule, because it's so true when you're out and about and, you don't know when you're an elected official and you're going to be, you may just be asked a question and you don't, if you're not informed, or you have no kind of idea that whatever went out, right? Or even as like a town manager or a town administrator, you want to be knowing what your staff is saying and what's going out. You should be informed every step of the way, so that when that does happen, you're not kind of caught with your pants down of like, I don't know we sent that out, or I was not familiar with that, so that's great. I love that. Let me see here. So I wanted to, this is for Kirsten. This is a more, I guess I want to know, what was an experience that you had interviewing, say, a municipal official that didn't go well, or they did something that they shouldn't have, or said something that they shouldn't have, that led you to open the door essentially for more questions, and it just maybe wasn't a good look for them, but it was your how you perceive the whole interview, and you know what I'm saying.
That's a good question. Um, Without going into specifics, I'm going to generalize this a little bit. So I think one of the more common things I've seen from my end is in a press conference setting. Um, let's setting the scene here. There's officials talking to reporters. Reporters are rapid fire questioning off whatever the topic may be. What I have seen is officials get frustrated by the line of questioning. And that is hard to mask when you are in front of the cameras, in front of reporters. It's usually right all over your face. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be they don't like the line of questioning. It could be, let's say, a reporter asks an obvious question, right? That seems obvious to you, but maybe they're asking because they need the soundbite. They need you to address it clearly on camera. Or maybe they're trying to evoke an emotional response from you because this is an emotional story and they want something a little bit more than just here's the facts, here's the run of what happened, right? Um, Either way, I have seen officials get frustrated, and that is a bad look. Everything is live streamed these days, everything's on camera, and I've actually seen officials get so frustrated they cut off the press conference and they walk away. I don't like to use the word storming off, that seems a little aggressive, but you can tell when the tensions are rising and feelings are coming out. I would say that is an example. I think it's so important to keep your cool, even if you don't understand why a reporter's asking a certain question, or if you feel like they're leading you, which, you know, we're told not to do that, but sometimes it happens, right? Realistically, that can happen if a reporter's trying to make a point, or get to the heart of something that maybe has been beaten around the bush a little bit. Um, so I think it's so important to stay professional, stay calm, cool, and collected. Once the cameras are off, maybe you have a conversation with that person, but um, I have seen that time and time again in every market I've worked at. And I just think it's so important to remain professional and try to keep your cool, because it's not just reporters that are seeing that, that's going across the airwaves. And you don't want that to become part of the story, right? That could also be a piece of um, when a journalist is explaining what happened, that could become part of that story, and you just don't want that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, we've definitely seen that in the line, and having worked in the news too, I've seen it too. And it takes your breath away almost. It's almost like you get secondhand embarrassment for that person. And then, then also you don't want the message of the story to get lost, as the public official giving the message, because of the way that you have the emotion written all over your face, or you just didn't handle a question well. So thank you for that. Because I feel like it's probably obvious to be like, keep your cool, but at the same time, it's hard when emotions are heightened or you're under a lot of pressure. It's overwhelming, even for everyone involved. It's overwhelming. So definitely a good thing to keep in mind when doing a press conference. I'm trying to think here if there's anything else. Let's see. So when you did work in the news, Kirsten, how did you balance getting a story out quickly with ensuring accuracy, especially with breaking news? Was like basically what did you do to like did you have a checklist of make sure that everything was accurate and getting information from the correct people, or having to like interview multiple people to make sure you get the whole kind of story, especially in breaking news situations?
Yeah, breaking news, you're inundated like everybody else with rumors and information that might not always be accurate. So, I think to some of the points we've made in this conversation, it's great to go straight to the figurehead of whoever's leading that investigation or whoever's taking control of the breaking news situation and get the information from a trusted source. Um, if we're getting information from, Joe Schmo down the road who saw this and heard that, I think depending on the claim, it might be valid. Let's say he saw something. Okay, that seems fair. But if it's a controversial backstory or if he has a theory, that's something that we would ask an official about. I don't think you're going to see reporters ever, and you shouldn't. Speculation is not okay. So that's off the table, but you will see reporters ask questions about things that they've heard in the community because that also is a component here. Maybe they saw something on social media that they want to ask about, but you'll see them going to trusted kind of figureheads and whoever's taking control of that breaking news situation to confirm that. Um, and that's the way it should be, honestly. Reporters get in hot water if they're reporting something that hasn't been confirmed or can be speculative in any way. So that's a big part of what we do is just confirming what is accurate and being truthful about the things we don't know yet. So if we're working to find something out, if we don't know the answer to said question that maybe is a question everybody's wondering, it's important for us as journalists to also convey that to the community and say, we've heard your concerns. We're looking into this. We've asked so and so for the answer to this question that we've been hearing time and time again. And as soon as we learn more information, we'll make sure to pass that along. So kind of twofold there.
I think that's important too to mention that like owning the narrative and making sure as the municipal officials you are the number one source. You are the first to give out this information, and it's accurate information, and you are the trusted source, so that you are building that transparency with your stakeholders and your community members so that they know, this town, this official, I can trust them essentially, even when they do say that they don't have all the information. So really being those, owning the narrative essentially, and owning what's happening and getting out in front of something before it escalates, right? That's super important. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. If anyone has any other questions from our audience, or if anyone else wants to chime in about their experiences, or if they have anything specific that they want to add, that would bridge more conversation. No?
I just go back to my themes. Tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. The media is not your enemy. Invite them in, have coffee, bring them into your office, get to know them, forge a relationship. You will never, ever not benefit from actually forging those relationships. So you're creating trust and credibility. Those are the foundations of a good relationship with the media.
Absolutely.
And I would love to echo that, just being on the other side of it. We're normal people. We want to have good relationships with the people we work with every day. We want to be accurate. We want to, we want to be looked at in a positive light. I like what Troy said, the media is not the enemy. There has been a lot of, you know, anxious thoughts around media coverage. Make sure you're getting your information from trusted sources, of course, but um, journalists are out there on a mission to tell the truth and to hopefully make a positive impact in the community. And, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
I echo both Troy and Kirsten's statements. The media is your friend. They're one of your best allies and tools to get information out there. And just, work with them, and honesty is the best policy, as Liz said earlier, just like her mom told her early in life. It's better to tell the truth than get caught up in something you don't want to get caught up in. So I think that's awesome. Also, training and work with your staff and kind of reinforce that with your staff members, that if they have a question, to come to you with it first and then work it out with them.
Yeah, I really liked what Christina was saying about how she's kind of given her staff members like the guidelines when speaking with the media, and to ask questions if they're unsure before going, having that dialogue with a media member. It's super important because, a lot of people are just kind of voluntold and in voluntold positions to be like, you have to be the one to give out this information, right? So make sure it's accurate, make sure, it reflects us in a positive light. So it's good to just kind of have that knowledge before speaking to the media. But going to what Nicola said about training, we are offering a training, Kirsten and I, in the end of July. So tune in to that. We have 3 media modules that we are going to be offering our presentations on, and open to everyone virtually. So we will share more information about that. But thank you all for being here. Thank you to our panelists. This was excellent. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.